So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this open table. Our guest today is Makhacheva, this young Dagestan artist. I'm very happy to have you here, and I'm sure it will be very interesting talking with you today. Taus, I don't know if you already seen her video, which is at the Arsenale. Presented the two pieces for the Viva Arte Viva Biennale. One is the video Tightrope that we can see at the Arsenale, and the other one, it's a performance that you should have seen in the link I sent you, because it's the link of the artist practice video, and it is called Baida, and you can find just the label at the Giardino delle Vergini, Garden of the Vergini, here in Arsenale. I think I made a mistake. I said at the Arsenale, not Giardini, for the video. I'm sorry. And so, welcome. And would you like to introduce us maybe your choice for these two pieces for the Biennale?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming. It's a pleasure to see such a large and beautiful table. And I've heard it takes a bit of time for people to start eating, so let's just kind of feel free to start. It's not formal, it's going to be very informal. So I'm also happy to keep it in a very discursive mode, as it's supposed to be, so feel free to interrupt, sing, shout, ask, whatever you feel like doing. First of all, thank you for the invitation to the Biennale and to Tavola Aperta, to Christine and the whole team. And so it's two pieces. One was developed especially for Venice and for the context of the Biennale, and another one was Tightrope. And this was the work that Christine saw and thought it was particularly relevant for the ideas she had for the Biennale. So I can't say it was really my choice to include it, but it made sense. Because also I think it made sense in sort of the way you view the Biennale, in this kind of, quite a continuation of some sort of avant-garde impulse, if I can even say that. I mean, that particular work in a way. And this general feeling and anxiety of precarity that all people working within the fine art field have. And I'm talking about museum workers, gallery workers, artists, gallerists, like all my friends that I talk to, they have this sort of sensibility and this sort of unstableness that follows you everywhere you go. That particular piece, I mean, I can talk for a while about it, because it's been done in 2015, and I've done a new version for Venice. And it was kind of a long process that started off with me being unhappy with the position of culture that I observed around me, and how it became sort of, how it still sometimes was considered as sort of as a service, as something that is sort of meant to serve power. So kind of where this sort of vision of endangering on this tightrope came from. Thank you. Yes, please. Yes, thank you. So that was one work. And then I've also, because I was participating in an exhibition at Pompidou that Alicia Nock curated, Museum on Off, at the time in May. Well, Christine saw the work during our Dubai at the gallery I was exhibiting with, Laurie Shabibi. And then I also, like a few months later, I was in this show at Pompidou, and my friend did a performance there, because I couldn't sort of do it myself, and her name is Super Taus. So I also have this alter ego, or my friend, or second personality going on. So the performance was about this sort of very simple woman from Dagestan carrying a massive sculpture on her back, the sculpture to two invigilators that saved a Rochenko painting from theft. So we had a conversation with Christine about what can I do for Venice, and we talked about if Super Taus can exist there, but it didn't feel right, because she's quite a humorous character, and this context emphasizes humor, and kind of, I think Venice tends to swallow a lot of meaning, because everywhere you go, when kind of you're at the opening or post-opening, it's so many things. They're so shiny, they're so big, they're so red, they're the bigger, the better. Yeah, they just kind of try to grab you. So for me, it felt really impossible to do a work which would be of that grand scale, or even doing something with super taus. So I came up with this performance called Baida, and in Russian word, if you pronounce it as Baida, that's the name of very basic boats that illegal and legal fishermen use in Dagestan. And if you pronounce it as Baida, it's basically lies that you tell to people. So that's why I decided sort of not to translate it. It became this performance that is supposedly happening at certain coordinates in the Adriatic Sea with a capsized boat, that's what the label says, and the two fishermen who appear, disappear, a script written by Tim Etchells. But there's no transport because, Biennale couldn't afford transport to see it every day. It's limited financial means. Is it there? Is it not there? Has it sank? Will you ever be able to catch it? So the only thing you get is this online video of supposedly art crowd people, 3 people going to see it and discussing it. What can it be? What an artwork is? How do you make artwork about sort of sinking people around us, be it fishermen, or be it sort of people who are leave their homes for hope of security in some other land. Yeah, so that was a very long introduction, sorry. Even Ice is tired.
No, I think it's no, absolutely. But you always mention Dagestan, so we know that it's quite important, your background and being a Dagestan artist. Can you explain us?
Yes?
Yes.
What is it that you want to know?
So, because your school were done in England, in London. No.
Yes.
It's a mistake.
No, it's not a mistake.
Sometimes it happens.
You're just destroying my myth, the one that I strive on. So immediately, I thought it would happen in the end of the discussion.
No, from the beginning, we just want straight away, from the beginning. So what about the Dagestan culture and your country? How it influenced? It is really present, of course, in your tightrope video, and even the selection of the painting that were done by you, of the copy of the painting, of course. It is, I think it's very important for the main significance of the video itself. So shall you, I don't know, go?
Yes, let's go into Dagestan. Let's travel. Let's change geography that we have. Well, I am indeed a product of British education. What can I do? Although I have a degree in economics in Russia, but that's my other life that I sort of gave up. I mean, I tried when I was doing my BA at Goldsmith. I tried to sort of to have a studio practice and be kind of in a dialogue with, I don't know, 20th century artists, fantastic artists, and develop a work in this sort of capsulized mode. But it just didn't work. I needed, I wanted a reference point, a very human reference point, or a geographical reference point. And this is, I think, where sort of Dagestan came into place. Because I think kind of there are questions you can talk about sort of which are specific, but then they have a much wider reading. I mean, like a good example would be A Letter to Unknown Pilot by Akram Zataria work, which I love. And it's like, it's so wide and it's so narrow at the same time. And I think it's the same thing here, because why this is so recognizable, because you have to, why Tightrope is so recognizable. The book I'm passing around has actually been published by Moose Publishing on the project, which I'm super excited. It's like my first publication with the publishing house. And so it's at the same time, it's about Dagestani Museum of Fine Art. It's about their collection. It's about invisible histories of art. It's about 61 work that we've selected with the collection keepers in order to give an overview of that history, which is sort of, in a way, invisible. Well, I mean, invisible to who? That's another question. So it's specific to that context, but then it's very recognizable to, the mode of discovering histories of art, which central European museums take. You have this committee, that committee, they travel, and that's how things get resurfaced suddenly. Oh my God. So it's this question of that, and there's also a question of how you work as an artist, like how you wonder whether your work will enter historical future through this structure that looks like this modernist museum or cube or something structures, but which is not exactly structured because the wind and any type of weather can still access it. So it's things like that. And for example, I mean, there were a lot of rational decisions in the work. But for example, I was asked, I think maybe it was Chantal Kleeman, maybe, that I had a studio visit with when I was at the Jan van Eyck Academy. And he asked if, which way is the tightrope going to walk through? And I was like, well, right to left. And she's like, what about we right from left to right? And I started thinking, because for me it was not even a question. I started thinking, how do we perceive progress? What is progress? Is he going from the past into the future, or from the future into the past? So kind of all these things also kind of tune into these questions. So I think it's specificity and width of it at the same time. And yeah, how do you pick works from a collection to illustrate a certain history of art is also a big challenge, let's put it that way.
Yes, even in the conversation that you had in the book, there's the conversation about you and the with the tightrope walker, and you discuss about the matter of preserving the culture, Dagestan culture, and Dagestan arts itself. So even the tightrope walking, it's a pretty Dagestan culture and traditional things. So you put together lots of theme to get about the Dagestan culture.
That's actually what I think my British education has taught me, so I have to keep crediting it for it. It's sort of you come up with a big amount of one-liners, and if that was sufficient at some point, it's no longer, because there are so many themes, there are sort of multiple meanings, multiple worlds that artists try to combine and arrive somewhere else and take the audience somewhere else. So it's I don't know, it's like, I don't know, making whatever, a pearl necklace, for a lack of a better metaphor at the moment. You hear a story about a museum collection being forced to move within 1 week into a new building. You're angry. That's the first thing you put on your necklace. You hear about this dying skill of tightrope walkers with festivals, which was kind of incredibly popular. There were circus troops in the Soviet times. You hear about that. You think, how can that match? I went to this fantastic forum, and then there was also one moment that made me realize some things. It was some political thing about urbanism in Dagestan. I don't know. I'm not sure why I was invited. So my group was something about culture and urban development. So we had a meeting, and our group leader was a woman. The rest group leaders were men. So when they were presenting, I think there were presentations at the end of the day. So head of parliament of Dagestan, he left at the time where a culture group that was headed by the only woman was presenting. Maybe he had to make a phone call. Maybe he had to use the bathroom. But it's still a choice. This is like, this is where I exit. And I was like, how interesting. Like, no hard feelings. But sort of, you start thinking about patriarchal society. You start thinking what face culture has. And kind of that all the museum directors are women, all the ministers of cultures are usually women in Dagestan. I'm just talking about quite a specific time. So it's something you can like, that's, I can, this is the time I can make my phone call, then I'll come back. So, but that's sort of a fantasy. So that's another thing that goes on to it. And then you talk with the deputy director of the museum, with the director of the museum, with the collection keepers, trying to pick one work per artist and trying to understand why that work is important. So all these threads come into play as well. And you also question the themes that exist within your sort of history of art and how they influence your own practice, why nature kind of constantly appears in my own practice, as well as, those painters obsessed with landscapes of Dagestan.
And thinking about your works and what we discuss about them, even here in Venice, and the things that you too choose the food as media to share culture, and so as the Tavola Aperta, the food, yeah, so eat a little bit, if not it doesn't work. So as the Tavola Aperta is a way, you know, for staying together and share ideas and have a nice conversation, you choose the food in your artworks, in some of your pieces, to share yes, some significance of your your ideas, and I think yes, you brought some things to even for the other guests to understand it better. But if you can explain us even your the performance you did here in Venice at the beginning of the Biennale, it could be interesting for the Tavola Aperta meetings.
So there were two works in Arsenale and Giardini, and also I had a third project, which was at the VAC Foundation, whose exhibition director we have the honor of welcoming at our table, Maria. And it was actually like very much, so I developed a work in conversation with Peter Taub, who was a performance curator of the program, and Masha as well. And it was quite interesting because when you start doing something, you don't often believe it's going to come to a result. There's like the doubt thing and the constant negation of ideas. It's a good process, but it's always a process. So we ended up doing this performance called Stomach It, and I don't even, like, I'm wrong when I say it's a performance, because I called it a menu by Taos Makhacheva.
Yes.
So it was at the...
Yes, I made the mistake.
No, I also do it. Like I forget how I place things. So I'll start with reading a poem, which serves sort of as an opening for this menu, in Russian and in English, and maybe if someone can read in Italian as well.
Okay.
Если душа родилась крылатой, что и хоромы, и что и хаты, что Чингисхан ей, и что Орда, два на миру у меня врага, два близнеца неразрывно слитых, голод голодных и сытость сытых. Марина Цветаева, 1918 года. If your soul was born with wings, what does a hut mean or a place of kings? What Genghis Khan and what a horde? I have two foes in the whole world. They are two twins in one image united, hunger of hungry and the glut of the glutted. Can anyone do... Oh, you...
Se un'anima è nata con le ali, cos'è per lei un palazzo e cosa una capanna? Cos'è Gengis Khan e cos'è l'orda? Due nemici ho io a questo mondo, due gemelli, indissolubilmente fusi, la fame degli affamati e la sazietà dei sazi.
So
Maria.
maybe to give a brief introduction about the show, I can ask Masha, because then it would be much better for me to carry on.
Yes,
and
not,
then I can
not
eat,
only
actually.
the two of us. Yes. So she can eat and you can take a
And
microphone. Thank you.
Just say a few words about the show.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it works, you hear me.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Taos, for a brief introduction. And please eat, because I will not speak that long, so hurry up. No, at the VAC Foundation, I don't know if you heard about it, we just opened recently, and it's the first show here in our permanent space, which will be open for the next 35 years. And the idea was that we create an exhibition, which is a collaboration with Art Institute of Chicago. And we have a historical part, we have historical reconstructions, but then the VAC Foundation works with contemporary art. That's why we invited contemporary artists to get into dialogue with the historical collection. And Taos was one of the artists we invited to do performance. And when she came up with the idea for the performance, first of all, I was like, oh my God, food, historical works and food in the same place. And how many stations you want to do? 8? Really? 8? Yeah, so we were a bit skeptical, and we started the dialogue, but when she came up with every single idea for each stand, we realized that this will be very powerful for the opening days, because normally people come for the opening and they expect to have a tiny treat, a bit of food like here, and even less. And when they came to Taos, servants, which were beautiful students from Venice dressed in the white dresses, and they were offering people something. So everybody thought, oh, finally I get something. And then each time they realized they cannot eat it. It's just not possible because of the nature of the performance. And I think it's very important to explain. We were working with 100 years of revolution as a topic. And everything what happened after it in the 20s and 30s. So Taos took the starvation period in the 30s in the Caucasus and Ukraine as the main topic of her performance. That's why people were confronted basically with the non-possibility of eating during, and they were not expecting that. That's why then they started to ask questions, why is paper? Why, which says bread on it? Why do I get a paper and not bread? Or if I get bread, I cannot eat it. So they started all this conversation, and each stand, what I found very impressive in this performance, that each single stand was functioning without each other. So you could just have one of them and you would understand the meaning of the performance. You didn't need to go through the whole palazzo and participate in each of single treats, how I call them. Yeah, I don't know, Taos. Are you ready with
That's
food?
perfect. Had some hair,
Okay.
had everything.
Yeah. So,
um,
maybe you can explain some
yeah.
single parts.
I'm
so
sorry.
so
What is
yeah.
the foundation located?
VAC Foundation, Victoria and Contemporary Art Foundation. It's on Zatere, and the exhibition name is Space Force Construction. And we're open from 11 till 7 every day apart from Wednesday. You're very welcome to come. It's for free, no tickets needed. And we even have performances on Saturday and Sunday after 2 p.m. So please come. We will be very happy to see you there.
So basically, I'll. Well done, well done. I love the end line. So basically, as Masha said, there were 8 stations, and I mean, there's this folder with some images. So it's these images where you see the girls in white dresses with different trays that are going around. Maybe I'll actually pass these around. So, because I started thinking, there were fantastic historical works, beautiful. You've seen them. Yeah. There were fantastic historical works. And the prints are not precious, you know. Just maybe don't wipe your mouth with them, but
because they are hard.
I started thinking, because there were fantastic historical works, beautiful works, mediated by my contemporary artists, friends, and some big names like Barbara Kruger and Cao Fei. But I kind of wanted to add some reality to it, the reality of the country that was completely missing, and also kind of, once again, this bubbling champagne receptions in Venice. They just called for something different, you know, they just called for some type of other engagement. Well, anyway, I felt that way. So there were 8 stations, and it's basically, I don't know, some things that I've assembled on the subject matter. So there was, one girl had a speaker, and basically in that speaker there were just sounds of empty stomach, like, oh, I can't make that sound, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you all know how the empty stomach sounds. But it was also on a very short belt. So if somebody would listen, you know, it should be also very close. So it's about proximity, of how close you get to another body. Do we remember the sound of hunger anymore? Is it present? And things like that. There was a stand with where people served coupons, because all the bread was regimented, basically. I had since 1917, and I had a sample from 1929. And also the regiments and the amounts of bread changed, and I think one year they changed it to like 150 gram, and some 50,000 people died in the country. Just like 50,000. And then they changed it back like to 300 a day for workers, 300 grams for workers. So, but these coupons were printed on edible paper, so you would actually eat the small coupon that the girl would print out. So also some other references to eating small bits of paper. Then there was bread that I found, because I found a mention of, in the Russian State Archive for film and photographic documents, where I often go to start my research. I found this video of how people tried to make bread out of dried leaves and dried hay, so completely inedible, like pan de la fame, I think somebody mentioned. Also, there was 2 carrots served as a bunch of flowers, and it came from this poem, this excerpt from a poem, "Хорошо" by Vladimir Mayakovsky, where he talks about how he brought 2 carrots for his loved one so she would eat, because basically the doctor said if she doesn't eat, like, it's going to be the end of her. So this poem is also in this brochure. And he also kind of remembers how he used to bring flowers and chocolates, but it's no longer the... Then I also commissioned a perfumer, Ilya Nastenko, to develop a smell of fatty soup, or like some fatty soup, basically, because there were a lot of stories about people dreaming of smells and kind of remembering and having daydreams about food. So there was an empty casserole, and girls would lift the top, and then people would smell it, and somebody joked that it smelled like Chanel No. 5. But then there was also, somebody just had water, because I interviewed Pirmagomedov, who's 91 years old, and he was in exile in Kazakhstan, was one of my distant relatives. And so I went to interview him. He's still alive, and I was like, "What did you have?" And I was like, "Did you have any juices or like compotes?" And he was like, "Sweetheart, we dreamt about drinking enough water. Like, what planet are you from?" So I included that as well to kind of demystify my knowledge as well a little bit. So kind of there was water, and then there was coal. One girl had a bag of coal, because I also found a story how in Dagestan in 1933/34 a family survived only because of the diamonds that the grandmother have, that she used to sometimes exchange for bread or for coal. So the idea was that anyone could exchange their diamond for that bag of coal. And then the diamond would be exhibited, but nobody really did it. But it's also about this, how, I know, it's like, I think I'm an artist who should be invested in, you know. I hope my works will cost a lot one day. So this could have been, you know, a good investment, perhaps more than that diamond would cost. And plus, we didn't really intend on checking if it was real or not. So, but it was also about this exchange, how things change value in times of war and extreme situations, how artworks are valued. A good example would be Damien Hirst's exhibition at the moment. So kind of about this value exchange. The most sort of fun thing that was there was a lollipop in the shape of Lenin's head. And it had small ribbons, Lenin's head, with the gum inside. And it had small ribbons that said, "A new revolutionary lollipop. Give shape to the leader's brains. Chew, don't swallow." So people got that. So you kind of changed the face by sucking on it. So that was our experimental menu for the opening of the Space Force Construction exhibition.
Any question? Of course, take a mic.
Hi, I'm a film and media arts student, and back to the topic that you were talking about, the fears of artists. And even though I still have 2 years until graduate, but like if you know humanity or arts students, when they graduate, people say, congratulations, you graduate. But as a humanity and art student, we'll be like, oh, shit, I graduated, now what? It's not like we're studying marketing or business. You can probably find a job or something. It's probably. Most likely. But as you said, because art industry is still pretty male-dominated world, and I was wondering how you feel like your position as a female that in this industry, and just like how also it's like fears also being a female artist, like compares to male artists. And also another question is, I was wondering, how do you think about censorship as you're like traveling around the world and get access to different cultures and stuff? So I was wondering how you define censorship within different cultural backgrounds and your concepts and perspective.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. In terms of male dominance, I was just referring to Dagestan, and that's a very small, specific context. Like these stories, I'm not sure how wide they apply, but yes, I mean, what is it, 70% of nudes are females and 34 like are, or I can't get the percentage right, of the Guerrilla Girls poster. But I mean, how do I feel about that? To be honest, I don't feel, I don't know, it's like, yeah, I don't think when you think about wider context, I ever felt sort of oppressed or that the choice was made in favor of like a male artist, of like in any sort of manner in a way. So there are kind of playful ways. I mean, I'm quite interested in actually different types of oppression that standard hypermasculinity has, but that has to do with kind of my specific context and sort of quite a performative masculinity that exists in the region. So I'm quite interested in that, as long as with different types of sort of questions that female performativity has. So I'm not sure I can say, I mean, I think it's incredibly hard. Everyone after graduating, it's like man, woman, girl, boy.
A lot of my artist friends, they started using pronoun as they, because when they submit their work, they didn't want the curator to know their gender. So they started to use they, but also in the context as they as a pronoun that transgender they use for LGBT communities. So I was like, it's not kind of the thing that you can, it's not like you can use it, but it's sort of like the thing that you use it without acknowledging that it's actually, there's another group that is that's living in a way, not like living in a way worse life, but they have like harder situation that you have as an artist. You just didn't want people to know your gender, that you just use that lightly, and I feel like it's not something that acceptable.
Maybe you're right. I mean, judging by all the forms I sometimes fill out, there's no option of a third type of identification. But I mean, my friend Vlad Shapovalov, who was the editor of Tightrope book, he joked, I was like, Taos, oh my God, you're perfect for grants now. You're female, you're from like the Caucasus, you know, you're just like, you tick all the boxes. And I was like, really? Where's the money? Like, it's like, wow, like I tick all the boxes. He was like, you just need to start applying. So, I mean, he was joking, but who knows? I mean, it's not there. So, I'm not sure. And I mean, after graduating, I don't know, the only way I thought about my practice was, I mean, I worked for a year just to check if I do want to be an artist or I can have like a normal life with like 9-to-5 job. Did not work out well. As you can see, I'm here, but I just, like, for example, even with Venice, Christine just saw the work. She saw the work. There was like, there wasn't some undercurrent sort of conversation. There weren't some kind of galleries schmoozing me in. So and this is my kind of naive belief: if the work does the work, you're fine. So like, that's a very sort of simple answer. And also, I was talking to artists that had a Tavola Aperta yesterday. Yes, Catherine Nunes and Isai Rodriguez, and they also were like, "This is like a shock. It's our first biennial."
Yeah, they had their Tavola Aperta yesterday, and they were quite shocked because they are the youngest artists exhibiting here. They are 24 and 25, and I think they were from the Philippines, and they were like, I think 23 and 24 when they were chosen, selected, also at Art Dubai.
Yeah. Because there was a section in the fair focusing. There's a section called Marker that focuses on different region every year, and it was focusing on Philippines, and that's where Christine saw it. So also they told me like, oh, when we received an email, it was like, take a look. Right. Is it spam?
Is it like spam?
Real? So
I know they told me we Googled to see if this person really exists.
Like, is she really the next curator?
Not click on it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not click on it. Sorry. What was the second?
Your perspective, your perceptions on censorship.
On censorship.
Tricky question.
Who can I say that? I think it's my work is also political as well, but I prefer things to be said through the work, because I would become a political activist if I wanted to be speaking out loud and so on. I think there are subtleties that come through an artwork and that can sort of influence people in a very direct and effective manner than that are just unavailable to kind of speech or rallies, or because it's very often you're told what to think, and for me it's always a matter of questions. Like, for example, in this there are some other food works that I have, and they actually all started with me stumbling upon a video at the Russian State Photographic Archive, and these are stills from that video. It's basically a cake in the shape of Caspian Sea in the middle, like where there's a chocolate sort of fondue thing in the middle. And then it's served to sort of Hitler and his generals. And the narration goes, so there's a slice they cut out with Baku, they insert a swastika and pour some chocolate oil on top of it. And the narration goes like, Nazi bastards wanted to conquer, Azerbaijan to get to Baku oil. But then the more you watch that video, the more you see that there's not a single frame of the cake and Hitler in the same frame. So most likely it was actually like a Soviet fake video that was sort of cut out from German propaganda. Yeah. The fake news reel, yeah, basically. And you're like, oh, wow, interesting. But kind of this gluttony was also quite fascinating. So basically, first thing I did, I just remade a cake and fed it to people based on the regions they wanted to consume. So, yeah. So that was, I mean, it's a cake, but it's quite political. It's about gluttony, and why do you even still want to, I don't know, eat a territory, own a territory? So kind of very, very simple and tasty questions that I try to ask in different ways. Yeah.
So thank you very much. First of all, I'm really enjoying this setting, and I feel compelled to speak, and I think it's because of this environment. I think I also had a bit too much Prosecco and wine, so I can't assure that my contribution is going to make any sense, but I think it's more of a comment. And I was thinking, I share your commiseration about being a product of the British education system, which has, some positive things and also some disadvantages. And I felt one of the things that you mentioned about these layers and these complexities are really fascinating. In fact, when you were talking, I felt so inspired by so many different things, but I couldn't help trying to find a thread or a way for me to navigate that discussion. And for me, a lot of what you said resonated with the notion of identity, in the sense that you spoke about an artist as a profession being marked by the sense of precarity, and then you spoke about people who are refugees and also characterized by that sense of precarity, and also you talked about your alter ego and different identities. And so I was wondering, how do you think about your identity, whether it's a national identity? You spoke about these cakes and why people would want to eat territories, and to me seems to have something to do with nationalism as well. And somebody like you, who probably, you lived in England, and I don't know where you currently live, but probably you've moved around. So I was wondering, how do you think about your own identity in terms of nationality, in terms of somebody mentioned gender, but just in terms of how you perform different roles in different situations, with different institutions, with different exhibitions, different work, and so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to hear your perspective.
I think it's a thing that is constantly changing for me. It's like now my political beliefs are so radically different to what I used to believe when I was 23. It's worlds apart. And I think it's interesting what you say about performing for various institutions and how you approach various projects and how you use sort of site specificity or geography specificity. And it is some sort of morphing that happens every time, because even the project for Venice, the Baida video that the performance that I conceived, like I went 3 times, I interviewed like different fishermen in Chioggi, in sort of in Venice and around, trying to understand. And then I understood that it's like, for example, everything is so visible, like I went to, I think it was Chioggi fish market, and then there was one guy who showed us this app where every boat that is on the Adriatic Sea, it's tracked. You can see it. He's like, oh, that's my Victorio Emanuele, and I'm 2 2. And I was like, wow, it's so visible. And then I kind of also started thinking the other type of boats, the invisibility of it. So, for example, this informed kind of my questions about what happens with these fishermen in Dagestan, because actually the whole thing started by when I heard a story about how sometimes when they're lost at sea, because they have to fly, they have to swim really far out to Kazakhstan to get sturgeon. And that's how they can earn money, basically. That's the kind of the biggest earning, some of them. And then sometimes when there's a storm, the boat capsizes, they tie themselves to the prow of the boat for 2 reasons. Like if they go crazy, so they don't drown themselves, but also so their bodies are found if they die. And this sort of cold-hearted attitude to death was so kind of fascinating and scary for me that it triggered the whole project. And then it triggered this invisibility that exists in Venice as well, and in the whole Europe, and also my thinking of how I open tabs with news about disasters that happen, and how sometimes I don't have the strength to read them until my computer crashes and they're all closed down. So it's kind of this sort of turning away, involuntary turning away that I'm part of, and I think some of my friends part of. I can't say everyone is part of. So this is, for example, how these 2 contexts merge. In terms of nationalism, of course, kind of I resent nationalism. I resent any type of, like, it's strange because I think I play with identity, with this Super Taos character, with my own sort of hybrid understanding of self. So this is actually an ongoing question for me. At some point, like I want to say, like, oh, I think all identity should be like stripped and destroyed, and it's such an out-of-date sort of conversation. But it's also kind of I navigate it, but it's a navigation through questioning what it really is. And also with Super Taos, I mean, because the first video that she did, it's actually open access online, and people can download it and own the video, because it's not like an editioned artwork. And this is how I sort of let it go. It was basically a video recorded on a dashboard camera, because they're incredibly popular in Russia. So you drive, you see this massive boulder on the road, and then this woman in a headscarf and like a very plain dress gets out of the car and pushes the boulder off the road and gets back into the car. So, and then this video sort of circulates. And there are road workers, men, who obviously try to move it and they can't. But I mean, of course it's all fake, but it's also, it's a very subtle question of like, of unrecognized sort of labor that most of my female relatives do. So kind of this is a game, I'm not that, or am I that? But also, I sometimes, when a friend of mine once asked me, so what happens when Super Taos doesn't do anything? I was like, oh, she lives her life in the mountains, she has kids, a husband, she works in like a kindergarten. So that's sort of my parallel life that I'm meant to have, this kind of hybrid that is expected by my family. And then I can have this one, just like with a Prosecco. So, yeah.
I would like to ask you about the landscape, because we had talked about the cultural elements in your work, but I see landscape being essential. That watching your video, towards the end, I became more and more aware of the landscape, and there's even a brewing storm at the end in the video that is so evident. So I would like to know, what's your personal relationship with landscape, and how do you go about choosing the settings from that perspective? From the landscape perspective.
Wow, I love that you don't ask me about, I don't know, the sublime or things like that, or just like, how do you place landscape within history of art? It's brilliant. My personal relationship, yes. I love it. Basically, it's, I think this is where I go to like recharge and restart, and this is where most of my questions come from. And get resolved in a way. And for example, with Tightrope, there was a lot of location scouting, because we went into, in Dagestan, like a lot of skills are divided by villages. Like there's a silver maker's village, there's a stone carver's village, there's a tightrope walker's village, who used to earn by like doing traveling performances, basically. So we went to that area, like around there, and then kind of many places. And this was actually the last place where I went and I was like, just last. I know everyone's tired, but just like I can see this thing in the very, very far away. Maybe that would be it. So this is how you find it. It's completely random, and there has to be some drive to believe that what you imagined can sort of can be realized. Yeah. And also we were talking with Marie about how I approach landscape, and I think it plays a different role in every work. And also the work becomes combinations sometimes of previous works, because I remember I did this small video which I never showed to anyone when I walk on the bridge holding a painting, just like a landscape painting as an icon in a way. So it's about belief, very simple sort of belief in art, and I think that video kind of in a way became tightrope. Another video where I'm kind of constantly pushing a rock but nothing changes, and actually this wasn't me who noticed it. A friend of mine, Sabi Ahmed, who was curatorial collegiate at the Shanghai Biennale, he mentioned it, he noticed it. So this was a video I made in 2012 called Endeavor, and basically me as a super small figure, I come out, push this rock for 9 minutes, nothing happens, I can't move it. So it's kind of about futility. And then Super Taus, you know, a few years later, she appears and she pushes the boulder off. So kind of it's strange how within your own artistic narrative, things get resolved later on with landscape or through fantasy and imaginary landscape.
Hello, I'm from Malta, and next scholastic year I'll be going into my thesis, and I'm kind of trying to base it on, you mentioned that you could say your work has an undertone of activism to it. And well, I'm going around with all the things I could possibly be activist about in Malta, be it environment, politics. The only thing is that I noticed that socially there's a lot of stagnancy, in the sense that even though there's a lot of cultural events going on, the general public don't really recognize them enough. So I feel this is something that could even be happening elsewhere, but in Malta especially, in certain aspects we're kind of stuck back in that Caravagesque, Baroque kind of embrace to things, and contemporary art is only being recognized by the people who are studying it, teaching it, you know, the people in that kind of cultural group. So obviously that's something I'd like to be activist about, but then there's a question of raising awareness about this or providing solutions about this, and I feel that when people are being activists, be it through art or other means of expression, they're only getting to the level of raising awareness about it. So perhaps you might have found a way, or have any suggestions that could perhaps fit a more, the essence of providing solutions to the issues within your work. Not just getting to that idea where, okay, people have seen the work, they know this is an issue, and they move on to the next artwork. So perhaps you have an idea about that, please.
I don't know. I'm quite small, and I'm fine with being small and having limited capacities to change things. So I think, but I mean, I can only speak for sort of my own practice, and I think food and the project sort of related to food is something that goes a little bit outside of me and has a different type of meeting with the audience. So that also, of course, teaching. I teach now in a state theater school, actually set design students, weirdly enough, and they are fantastic. I think they're incredibly talented, and that's kind of been a beautiful experience. But once again, to give you an example and to pass more things around, so it's exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, open the boxes.
So I did this, there was two things that I did. Basically, I'll do this. Here, just have a look, and then and I'll say a few words. So basically, I was in a residency called Politics of Food at Delfina Foundation. Fantastic residency, fantastic foundation. And Delfina Intracanalis, who just turned 90 this year, is a star. She's amazing. So basically, I did a dinner there. It was my first curated dinner called Gazing at the Highlanders, Gazing from Highlands. So I've presented everyone with this spoon. That was for the first time it resurfaced. And this is a copy of a spoon from the Dagestani Museum of Fine Art I think it's just 20th century, it's not that old. And it's something called so-called mustache spoon. So you drink and then you don't wet your facial hair. So this was the first time the work was presented, and it also had other elements to it, the actual dinner. And I'll show a few photographs. This was one because first there were historical dishes, and then there were the dishes of sort of from the Soviet times. And then when I was little, like caviar was so readily available that we were just incredibly annoyed with the amount of it, and that we're always asked to have a bit more, please. And you're like, no, not anymore. Maybe in potato, in mashed potato. So basically the dish was, I dumped my illegally sourced 1 kilo of caviar into mashed potatoes and served it. Well, legally sourced. So that was another dish, but also talking about excess. Talking about how things get limited, how things disappear, and also about my new friends, sturgeon fishermen, in a way. And then the last dish that was served there was a cake in the shape of Chanel bag, which was sent to me from Baku, from Velonia Bakery. So because also I started collecting, because I also on daily basis I collect weird photographs, weird things, weird manifestations of people's desires, and I think cakes are the best ones. Because you get these Louis Vuitton suitcases, Chanel bags, shoes, makeup, and I always wondered, so you give this cake in a shape of Louis Vuitton bag because you can't afford the bag, and that's like...
or you want to eat your shoes.
Yeah. So basically, so it takes you through kind of these steps, and then what I'm getting to is the spoon. So the next iteration was, you can try it if you want. It's actually sideways. Yeah, not like this. No, sideways, like this. Yeah. So basically, I served it with at the Garage Museum, and because they had their triennial, which was overview of the whole Russian art of the region. But I wanted to do something kind of outside the exhibition space, and I was like, oh, let's do an intervention in a cafe. So you could order a special soup called Baryatinsky. It's like a meat broth that was named after the commander who conquered Caucasus for Russian Empire, and it existed at the time when he was alive. And you can order just the soup, or you can order it with this mustache spoon, and eat it with it. So so you merge two knowledges and questions: what is progress, what is progressive society, and so on. Because I also found, different types of mustache spoons in Victorian times in England, and kind of different cups that also had. So I mean, there was a little intervention in the Garage restaurant that sort of was placed slightly outside, but I'm on that level, and these are my solutions.
But still, you're engaging the senses.
Yeah.
In a way, perhaps that's already capturing people a bit more than simplicity.
Yeah. And also, for example, I also really like kind of that people take away things. So I did this dessert called Crystal Balls for a festival minus 20 in Flachau in Austria. So it was basically jelly balls, transparent jelly balls on chocolate stands, and inside there was a €1 coin, which was completely blanked out. So there was no Europe, no €1, no hero, which is Mozart. So it's kind of this: what is the future of Europe? How can you? So you eat it, and then you keep the coin and take it with you. Take away that kind of small question about the value of money and the future of certain regions. Yeah, that's my long answer.
Hi, my name is Antonina. I have written to you.
Oh, yes.
And you were kind enough to answer this morning.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I finally made it. I'm a beginner artist who lives in Sweden, but I'm born in Ukraine. And I wanted to ask you about a subject that is close to my heart, and it might be close to yours, I think. It's about simple life. I think you are born in Moscow, right?
Yeah.
And you've studied in London, but you moved back to Dagestan, and I think that's where you live now. right? Well, I've read a lot
Past
of...
few months, questionable, but yes.
Well, officially. Yeah. And I've read a lot of your interviews in Russian. And I read once that you say that even though there are many people who move out of this country, you still chose to move back because this is where you can feel that you can be yourself, because things are simple. And I wanted to ask you if you can say something more about this simplicity and being yourself and maybe decluttering in every sense, or something like that.
I like that, decluttering.
That's what I have a project about decluttering. So I would like to hear your thoughts about it.
I mean, simple. I think time is different. The way it stretches there for me, like even in Moscow, it seems to swallow you from the morning, regurgitate and sort of spit you out around midnight, and you don't get to live. So Dagestan has different time span. Different nature has like an incredible effect on me. When I go in the mountains, it's like, I don't know, also time stretches. One day kind of becomes a week. So this thing, also very simple things of I can afford a studio and assistants there. I'm just being completely honest. Like I have a fantastic studio manager, Malika Alieva, who we've done Tightrope together very much, and who kind of designed the whole construction, who's like my second voice in pretty much everything. So it's this, but it's also, it's a space where I order a taxi, I get in, I'm sitting next to this driver, and I noticed that he has 2 window shields in the front windows, because you're only allowed to have a transparent window by police, and but he has 2. One is shaded, like exactly like 2 windows. Like he can put one down, and so when he passes the police, he puts the shaded one down, and when he likes in the evening, possibly kissing girls somewhere in the mountain, he puts the shaded one up. And you're like, wow, that's like there's a whole work there, you know? there's this inventiveness, like, but it's incredible inventiveness. Also the self-humor and self-reflexivity, like it's also something that is so present in a society. So it's not simple in a way, like simple is not, it's complex in many other ways. So kind of, and the conversations that I have, like for example, I have this video called, oh, I forgot. Oh, vocabulary, yes. Very much like what Bruno Munari did, his gestures. So there I'm a bit repetitive. So he, like I gathered together with these guys, Shamil Knyaz, that's his nickname. Shamil, the king, basically. So, and we discussed what type of kortочки, как сказать kortочки? Like when you sit super low, like squats, yes. Like we discussed what types of different squats men do and what they mean, what type of different handshakes, you know, you have, and so I built the whole vocabulary of sort of masculinity on that. And also another friend of mine that I talked to, Gadria Taif, he was like, you know, there's this thing when you walk in the street and, you know, you have to look in the eye of a man that is facing you. But there's the line, you know, you can't look for too long because then you're going to be like, what are you looking at? But you can't put the gaze away too early because then you're like a sucker, you know. So there's like all these things that become like a collection of things. It actually all started with me observing men like putting up their t-shirts very often, like touching their stomach, and I was like, what's this thing? Like, what is this? I'm ready, I'm showing you my six-pack. Like, this is why I'm there, because of these encounters that form works that I make, basically, yeah.
Can I ask something? Thank you for being with us here today. I'm actually interested in your approach towards what you call this dialogue with historical works. This seems to be very acute here in Italy because we are permanently surrounded, especially in Venice, with historical works of different epochs, different eras. You can take a very radical take to this, like Marinetti, who thought that one should bomb all the classical art in Italy because this actually constituted a burden on artists here. I've just been to Milano to see Da Vinci's Last Supper. There's an incredible industry on top of this. A normal person is allotted 15 minutes every day. You have to actually go to the internet and sign up And you have 15 minutes to see this and learn a bit of the techniques Da Vinci used for his frescoes and so on. Here in Venice, there is a very fascinating painting. I've known this painting for 40 years, and it's amazing how this painting has been in dialogue with modernity for these 40 years. And this is Veronese's Invito in Casa di Levi. This is also a supper in the Accademia. Some 20 years ago, Olivetti was there. They screened all of the painting with X-rays and showed how Veronese was censored by the Vatican at the time, how he painted lots of little devils, and art historians had their part in this as well, censoring something. Well, perhaps we shouldn't recover this, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, to make a very long story short, I would like to know some of your ideas about this dialogue with historical works. How you, I mean, what interests you on this?
Yeah. Well, I feel incredibly sorry for artists in Italy, to be honest. Because I don't know how to make work here. Like, it's incredibly hard. It's like, I don't know, when I was in Rome, I actually was talking to a friend of mine who's a fantastic Italian artist, Leone Contini, and we were also like, you're just paralyzed because there's so much eye pleasure. And I spent a winter, like a month in winter here, going to the ASAC archive, and I was reading the Brodsky's Fondamenta dell'Incurabile, and you're like, oh my God. It's like, how do you make it? I don't have an answer but I mean, with tightrope, that was my way of engagement, you know. This was my way of engagement and asking, what is the tradition I belong to? How can it become a collection within itself? And actually, I'm incredibly happy that the actual paintings and like an edition of the video and actual paintings are in the collection of the Van Abbe Museum and Mucke Museum. Because of Van Abbe, the way it collects like collections. So it also became a collection within a collection. So, but it's also because, for example, when we were thinking about structuring, what's the order of paintings they go in? Should you go like just through time or like whatever names? What type of artists do you include? So we included everyone who worked in Dagestan and Dagestani artists basically from the collection. But we decided to loosely base it on themes, and there were things, you know, connected to national representation of national identity, portraiture, very kind of standard themes, and landscape as well. So we mixed those things and based it loosely on that. So kind of through deciphering it and reassembling it, you also understand what things emerge. But like maybe also a really good example who I think is artistic mother of Super Taus is a painting by Galina Knapatska from the 70s called Cosmic Mother. It's from the 70s, and it's this beautiful painting of a woman, like a cosmic, like in the space with, you know, the helmet and everything, like a woman cosmonaut with a baby. And it's like, it's a secular Madonna, you know, of the time, empowered woman, and like it's all in it, also kind of coming from a local context. So this is what I think kind of Super Taus comes from, along with actually another superhero that I met, Super Sahrab, who's a superhero from Iran. This is how she actually appeared, because it was very much in dialogue with someone I encountered, but he's based in Tehran, but he has no superpowers. He only wears a suit and fails constantly. So this is also a very important theme of my, and the way I sort of started working is how I incorporate other artists' work and acknowledge it, you know, how a methodology from John Gerard's video work kind of migrated into Gamsutlov, how he works with military archives, and for example, what instructions are given to soldiers, what postures to take when they, I don't know, shoot a bomb off. So that sort of was incorporated in my video Gamsutel, where they reenact movements from war paintings. That was kind of part that I appropriated, and same with Super Sahrab. So I think that's very important. And maybe one last thing I can say about sort of how I started thinking about the practice. It's all one. It's like it's all your history of art to take from, you know. And as soon as you stop having this idea of competition, be it biennials, be it by looking at historical artworks and trying to, as long as you start thinking that this is yours to take, this is yours to take, this is yours to take, and to make something with it, then it works. Then there's no competition. And then you also realize there'll be someone coming very soon who's going to make so much more exciting works, and you can't wait to see it.
So, thank you very much, even because it was a way of answering of one of my questions that I didn't ask, that it was about the artist practice, but I think you really go further in it. So I'm going to thank you for this open table and close, apparently, this open table, because due to recording problems today, they have to stop now, but we can go on after the clap. They are off.